Truth was supposed to be the one thing wolves could not counterfeit. Scent, oath stone, bloodline memory, moon witness. All the old laws were built on that promise. Guinevere had believed it the way children believed winter would always be followed by spring, not because anyone guaranteed it, but because the world would feel broken without it. At the Harvest Moon Tribunal, beneath carved beams blackened by generations of torch smoke, she learned how easily truth could be dressed in another's skin. A lie, if perfumed with fear and repeated by the right mouths, could smell like law. Her wrists were tied in front of her with ceremonial cord rough enough to scrape skin every time she shifted her weight. And she had been shifting constantly because her lower back burned and the child inside her kept rolling, unsettled by the crowd's agitation. Rain hammered the roof in erratic bursts. Wet wool, tallow smoke, and old cedar filled the pack hall. Her cousin Lachlan Wildfire stood at the center dais in blood-red formal leathers, shoulders broad, face arranged into solemn grief, as if this accusation hurt him more than her ruin. "I beg the council to spare us this spectacle," he said, voice carrying cleanly to the last row. But treason festers when kinship is allowed to excuse it. Guinevere Bloodmoon met a rogue courier beyond the river path 3 nights running. She shared our patrol routes. 2 elders died after wine she served at my table. A murmur traveled across the benches like dry grass catching flame. Guinevere tried to step forward, but the cord jerked as the guard tightened his hold. Her wrist throbbed where the rope had rubbed against skin already raw. "That is a lie." Her voice broke on the first word and steadied on the second. "I never left the East Quarter after dusk. Elder Mara asked me to inventory grain sacks. Ask her ledger keeper. Ask anyone from the storehouse." "Elder Mara is dead," Lachlan replied, head tipping in counterfeit sorrow. "She cannot testify." He produced a folded scent cloth from a silver box and held it up between thumb and forefinger. "Found under her cot." Guinevere's trail and rogue musk intertwined. Guinevere's stomach dropped so sharply she pressed her bound hands against her belly on instinct. The cloth was one she had lost weeks ago, the linen square embroidered with her mother-line knot. Her breath shortened. "I am not crazy. I am not forgetting my own life. I know where I walked, who I spoke to, what I carried. I know this child kicked while I counted barley in lamplight. I know the shape of my own nights. If the hall says otherwise, then the hall is wrong, not me." One by one, witnesses rose. A stable hand who would not look at her claimed he had seen her by the river fence with a cloaked male. A server girl said Guinevere had asked strange questions about elder medicine. A priest's assistant swore Guinevere smelled of bitter root, the same herb found in the dead elder's blood. Each statement landed with practiced timing, each pause giving the lie room to harden. When Guinevere demanded scent truth, the elder on the left banged his staff and refused. Scent truth is forbidden where unborn issue clouds the channel. The right can fracture body and mind. Lachlan seized that opening. And we all know she was declared barren 6 months past. Her sudden condition proves she sought rogue magic, perhaps rogue seed as well. Laughter did not erupt, not openly, but she heard the sharp exhale of people enjoying cruelty while pretending discomfort. A woman in the second row whispered, not quietly enough, "Traitor broodmare." Guinevere lifted her chin though her hands shook. "You had those records forged." Lachlan leaned closer, so close only she could hear him over the rain and muttering. "You should have kept your head down and your grief tidy. Father meant to leave you a share. I corrected the error." By the time the council withdrew and returned, the verdict had already been decided and every eye turned toward her. The eldest judge read from a hide scroll with ritual cadence. Guinevere Bloodmoon, by witness sent article and council consensus, you are stripped of crest and inheritance, marked traitor to pack and kingdom, and banished beyond border stones until death. Any wolf who shelters, feeds, or ferries you is subject to 10 lashes and rank suspension. No one challenged it. Not one voice. Not one. The branding iron came from the brazier with a hiss that sounded almost gentle. She did not scream when they pressed the mark to the inside of her wrist, but the pain ripped the breath from her lungs and left a white ringing in her ears. The symbol was a broken crescent crossed by a bar, exile and dishonor. Someone cut the blood moon clasp from her cloak and tossed it at Lachlan's boots. As the guards dragged her down the hall steps, she twisted for one last look at the pack crest carved above the doors, the wolf and moon she had polished as a child before ceremonies. It blurred through tears she refused to shed until they were out of sight. Behind her, Lachlan's voice rang out, public and righteous. Let this stand as warning. Mercy for traitors is treason by another name. They took her to the border stones at dusk, shoved a satchel of stale bread into the mud near her feet, and left without speaking. The rain had turned mean, thin needles driven sideways by wind sweeping down from the high ridges. Her dress clung cold to her thighs. Her boots had split at one seam during the tribunal march, and every step drew icy water in. For a long while she stood between two carved stones slick with moss, not crossing, not returning, because both directions felt like death with different pacing. The child shifted, then settled. She pressed a palm to the curve of her abdomen and forced herself to breathe in counts of 4. Think. Do not fold now. Find shelter first. Then water. Then any road that does not carry wildfire patrol scent. She moved along the tree line, keeping low where bramble and alder gave partial cover. Night deepened fast under storm clouds. Her wrist burned. Her hips ached with each careful step, and cramps tightened in waves low across her belly, enough to frighten but not enough to stop her. She found a hollow beneath an overturned cart half swallowed by nettles, and crouched there to chew one corner of bread until her throat accepted it. By midnight, torchlight appeared through the rain. At first, she thought it was a border patrol passing. Then she caught Lachlan's captain's scent on the wind and heard voices at the ridge above her hiding place. She cannot have gone far with that belly. Order was no escort, not no retrieval. He wants her at dawn. For purification? For whatever he calls it in public. Just bring her breathing. Guinevere's pulse slammed against her ribs. Dawn retrieval meant a staged mercy, a public rite, a cleaner killing. She eased backward on hands and knees, mud soaking her sleeves, until a root snapped under her weight with a crack too loud for the storm to hide. There, down slope. She ran. The forest floor pitched and twisted, slick leaves over stone, thorn branches grabbing her skirt. Cold air cut her throat raw. Pain flared from her branded wrist up her arm every time she pumped it for balance. Behind her came crashing footfalls and shouted directions. A crossbow string twanged once, then again, bolts striking trunks nearby with blunt, splintering thuds meant to herd rather than kill. She veered toward lower ground where the trees thinned. Rainwater streamed in narrow channels across packed earth, converging into a ditch that paralleled a road she could not yet see. The smell reached her before the sight. Oil, iron, horse sweat, cured leather, military supply scent, kingdom transport route. If she could reach soldiers outside Lachlan's command, there might be rules he could not bend quickly enough. A hunter gained on her left and lunged, fingers brushing her cloak. Stop, traitor! She ripped free, fabric tearing at the shoulder. Her boot slid on shale and she went to one knee, palms slamming into freezing runoff. The child rolled hard, then went still. Panic sharpened her vision to knife edges. Up. Move. She stumbled down the embankment and burst onto the road as a wagon lantern rounded the bend, light swinging golden through rain. Horses shrieked and reared. Men shouted. She raised one hand in a plea she could not voice, and then her legs gave out entirely. She hit the mud on her side, cheek against cold gravel, breath shallow and uneven. Hooves stamped close, then stopped at a command so quiet she barely heard it through the rain. No one touches her. Boots approached, measured, certain. A man crouched beside her, broad shoulders blocking the lantern glare. His face was partly shadowed under a wet hood, but she saw the scar first, a brutal line cutting from throat to cheekbone and across the corner of his mouth, old and pale against weathered skin. Rumors had painted that scar on nightmares told to children. His scent reached her next. Pine smoke, steel, storm wind, and power held tight like a fist. Another soldier asked, "Sir, do we search her for marks?" The scarred man's reply carried no rank insignia, no shouted authority, yet every voice fell silent after it. "You will bring blankets and hot water. You will keep your questions to yourselves. No one asks who she is carrying." Then darkness folded over her like a cloak, and for the first time since the tribunal doors had closed behind her, Guinevere let it take her. Darkness did not stay merciful for long. It thinned into noise first, the rattle of wagon wheels over broken stone, harness chains clinking in uneven rhythm, rain ticking against waxed canvas stretched above her. Guinevere floated between sleep and pain, rising each time a jolt dragged a breath from her chest, sinking when the child went quiet again and panic gave way to sheer fatigue. "Easy," a low voice said near her shoulder. "Do not force your lungs. You are safe enough for this mile." Safe enough. Not safe. The distinction lodged in her mind like a splinter. She opened her eyes to dim lantern light and the outline of broad knees braced across from her. The scarred soldier sat with his back to the wagon frame, cloak soaked through, one hand wrapped around the support post to keep himself steady as they climbed a grade. Someone had covered her with 2 military blankets that smelled of smoke and juniper soap. Her branded wrist had been rinsed and wrapped in clean linen. She had no memory of that. The child shifted once under her palm, slow and stubborn, and relief nearly made her cry. She swallowed it down and looked past him through the slit in the rear canvas. 4 riders flanked the wagon, silent, watchful, not one wearing wildfire colors. Their leathers were plain dark brown, rank knots removed, but the way they moved told a different story. Tight formation, clean hand signals, eyes tracking treeline and ridge without wasted motion. Not militia, not border scavengers. Trained wolves. The scarred man followed her gaze. "My unit," he said. "No one here will touch you without permission." "Why?" Her voice came out hoarse and small, and she hated both qualities. "You do not know me." His mouth tightened along the old blade mark. "I know enough." She tried to push up and failed when dizziness rolled through her. He leaned forward, then stopped himself halfway, as if pulling against instinct. "May I help you sit?" A question, not an order. In a night that had stripped her down to animal fear, that small courtesy felt almost foreign. She gave one short nod. He slid an arm behind her shoulders and lifted with careful precision, no grabbing, no haste, setting a folded cloak at her back for support. Heat radiated from him even through wet wool, battle-warm and steady. She inched away on reflex the moment he released her, and shame burned hot under her skin. He did not comment on it. The road curved, and the canvas flap lifted with wind, revealing a rise ahead crowned by old stone walls. Lightning forks carved the clouds apart for one stark second, and she saw the fortress clearly, a ruined watchtower fused into a newer defensive ring, black basalt battlements stitched with pale runes that glimmered in rainwater. Stormborn land markers, she realized, not merely a supply route, a border post at the edge of Crown territory. Her pulse jumped. Lachlan could pressure local packs. He could buy elders. He could threaten tributary clans. He could not simply walk into the Alpha King's military wards and issue private commands, unless the king chose to listen. The wagon slowed at an iron-bound gate set between carved wolf heads worn smooth by centuries of weather. Sentries emerged from recessed guard stations, bows lowered but ready, One stepped close enough for lantern light to catch the white braids at his temples and the scar crossing his brow ridge. Veteran. Dangerous. Halt and identify. The scarred soldier reached into his cloak and held out a ring seal, turned inward so Guinevere could not see the sigil. The veteran's posture changed at once, not dramatic, not theatrical. A fractional lowering of chin, a hand to heart, quick enough that anyone not trained to read submission might miss it. "Gate open," the veteran called. "Clear North Yard and Wake Infirmary." No one questioned the order. No one asked her name. As the gates groaned apart, Guinevere pressed her fingers to the blanket edge to hide their tremor. The rain eased to mist within the wall line, caught and thinned by layered weather wards that smelled faintly of iron, sage, and moonstone. She had seen that quality of spellwork only once before, as a child at a royal procession, when the king's outriders passed through Blood Moon territory, and even the wind seemed to step aside for them. She turned back to the scarred man, studying him with new caution. Rankless leathers, no crest, no title offered. Yet gate commanders moved for him like muscle obeying bone. He met her gaze and understood exactly where her thoughts had gone. "I am Orion Stormborn," he said, each word stripped of ornament. "Tonight I am the wolf getting you and your child indoors. The rest can wait until you are warm and breathing properly." By the time they crossed the North Yard, dawn had begun as a thin silver wash along the eastern wall, and Guinevere's exhaustion had sharpened into a dangerous clarity that made every sound feel too bright. She counted boots on stone to stay upright when two soldiers lowered the wagon step. Orion moved beside her without touching until she swayed. Then his hand hovered at her elbow. "May I?" She nodded again. He guided her down slowly, matching her pace to the ache in her hips and the pull low in her abdomen. The tower entrance smelled of wet mortar and medicinal herbs. Inside, old arrow slits had been sealed with glass, turning the central chamber into an improvised infirmary with cots, stacked blankets, a banked brazier, and shelves of bandage rolls tied in twine. A gray-haired healer approached, eyes flicking to Guinevere's wrist brand and then away, with deliberate neutrality. "Water is heating, broth in 10 minutes. I need pulse, pupil response, and belly tone." Orion answered without looking away from Guinevere. "No invasive checks unless she consents while fully awake. Start with warmth and fluids." The healer's brows climbed, then settled. "Understood." Guinevere tried to protest when they urged her onto a cot, but her teeth had begun to chatter and her limbs no longer trusted her intent. Orion crouched long enough to pull off her soaked boots. He worked quickly, almost clinically, yet his thumb paused for half a second over a torn seam where cold water had rubbed her skin raw. Anger crossed his face, abrupt and unguarded, then vanished. "I will stay outside the curtain while they change your dressings," he said. "If anyone enters without your leave, call my name." "You expect me to trust that?" His expression did not harden. If anything, it gentled in a way that unsettled her more. "No. I expect you to survive the morning. Trust can decide later." He stepped back. The healer drew the curtain. Steam rose from a basin. Guinevere clenched her jaw as warm water met the brand, and grime loosened from her skin in gray streaks. "I am still here. I am still in my body. I have a name even if they stripped my crest. I have a child who answered my hand in the wagon. And that means we are not finished. Do not read kindness as safety. Do not read strength as honor. Men have looked righteous while arranging your execution. Men have spoken of law with poison under their nails. Breathe. Count. Watch everything. If this is another cage, learn its hinges. If this is a reprieve, use it. I can shake later. I can grieve later. Right now I keep breathing, and I keep her alive, and no one decides my ending except me." When she woke again, the rain had stopped entirely. Pale morning light filtered through the sealed slits and laid cold bars across the stone floor. The chamber had quieted to the low crackle of brazier coals and distant guard calls from the yard below. Orion sat on a stool beside her cot, sleeves rolled, replacing the bandage on her wrist with fingers more suited to sword hilts than linen knots. Up close, the scar that split his mouth and jaw looked older than rumor had made it. The edges cleanly healed, the center ridged where cursed steel had bitten deep. She had heard tavern stories of that mark since she was 12. Wolves claimed the king who bore it had torn out the throat of a rival alpha with his bare teeth. Wolves claimed he could scent lies through fortress walls. Wolves claimed many things. This man had asked permission before touching her elbow. "You are awake," he said quietly. "Any dizziness?" "Less." Her voice felt steadier now, though her heart picked up when his hand brushed her pulse point to secure the wrapping. "How long?" 2 hours. You drank broth between sleeps. Argued with the healer once. Fell asleep mid-sentence. A thread of reluctant amusement tugged at her mouth and vanished. "What did I say?" "That if anyone called you fragile, you would throw the bowl at their head." That one stayed long enough to become the smallest real smile she had worn in days. Then her gaze caught on the scar again, on how it pulled one corner of his mouth when he concentrated, and a pressure gathered behind her ribs so sudden it hurt. Without thinking, she lifted her hand. He went still, not flinching, waiting. Her fingertips brushed the pale ridge along his jaw. Heat struck first, a fierce wave pulsing from the point of contact through her throat, chest, belly. The child tightened low inside her, then settled into a deep, calm roll that felt like recognition. A low thrum built in her sternum, ancient and undeniable, and the animal part of her rose to full alert with a single astonished cry. Breath caught in her lungs. The room's edges sharpened, every scent turning bright. Cedar ash, Orion's storm and steel skin, the raw iron note of her own blood where her palm had reopened a little on the bandage seam. Orion inhaled sharply, as if struck. Amber bled into his irises in a fast, startling flood, pupils narrowing to predatory slits. Power unfurled from him in controlled rings, not an attack, but a force so immense the brazier flame bent sideways, and the glass in the nearest slit hummed. He dropped to one knee beside the cot, not in weakness, in reverence, eyes locked to hers as if looking away might break something sacred. "Guinevere," he said, and she had never told him her name. Fear and hunger collided under her skin. Desire, yes, but braided with fury, grief, and the deep animal relief of being known without explanation. Her first instinct was to pull back. Her second was to lean closer. Both felt dangerous. Both felt true. His voice roughened. "I will not take what you do not offer. Not your trust. Not your bond. Not one breath." The pull between them tightened, bright as drawn wire. She could feel his heartbeat through the space separating them, feel the answering rhythm under her own palm where it still rested against his scar. "You are afraid," he said. "So are you." A brief, unsteady laugh escaped him, almost disbelieving. "More than I have been on any battlefield." She should have withdrawn her hand. She did not. Instead, she traced the scar once, lightly, and watched awe and terror war across the face every kingdom child had been taught to fear. In that suspended moment, with dawn whitening the tower stones and bond light gathering like threads, she could sense, if not yet see. Guinevere understood that whatever this was, would not let either of them pretend to be untouched again. Guinevere did not move her hand until Orion's breathing evened and the hum in the glass faded. The pull between them remained, taut and bright. But he was the one who broke contact, lifting her fingers from his scar with care that felt almost ceremonial. "Your body has been through too much already," he said, voice roughened by restraint. "The bond will press for more. I will not." No male in her life had ever spoken desire and refusal in the same sentence. Hunger climbed her spine anyway, not just for touch, but for the frightening possibility that he meant what he said. He rose, stepped back a full pace, and reached for the curtain tie, drawing it half open so the healer's station became visible from her cot. "If you want distance, say it and I sleep outside the door," he continued. "If you want a witness present any time I am in this room, I will keep one here. If you want me gone entirely, I go." She stared at him, disoriented by choice. "Why give me all that leverage?" His jaw flexed along the scar. "Because wolves like me do not get to ask for trust while standing on old entitlement, and because you are carrying life while half the kingdom tries to write your death into law." The words landed hard. Not pity, not possession, recognition. "I do not know what to do with this," she admitted. "You do not need to decide today." He bowed his head once, not submissive, not dominant, and turned toward the door. At the threshold, he paused. "You are safe in this tower as long as I draw breath." After he left, she lay back slowly, palm over the steady curve of her belly, and let confusion wash through her in uneven waves. "I am waiting for the cost. I am counting what he gave so I can brace for what he takes. That is what survival has taught me. Every kindness has a hook, every shelter a lock, every promise a clause hidden in the dark." Yet he stepped away while the bond was burning through both of us. He offered witnesses. He offered distance. I do not know how to hold that without dropping it. I do not know how to trust it. But I felt the child settle when he spoke, as if my body recognized safety my mind still refuses. I am not ready to believe. I am ready to watch. By the time afternoon light thinned from silver to blue across the sealed arrow slits, fatigue finally dragged her under. The dream came like tribunal smoke, hot, greasy, choking. Hands pinned her wrists. Lachlan's voice called her barren and false, while the branding iron descended again and again, each hiss followed by laughter she could not locate. The hall doors were barred. Her child kicked once, then went still. She tried to scream and tasted ash. She jolted awake with a raw gasp, fingers clawing at blanket and bandage, pulse racing so violently her vision spotted at the edges. The infirmary was dark, except for one low flame cupped in Orion's palm, blue-white and steady as a banked star. He knelt beside a small iron tripod near her cot, warming a pot of broth with the same concentration he had used on her bandage, as if this too was a tactical operation. "You are here," he said softly. "Nightmare?" She nodded, unable to force words around the tightness in her throat. He shifted to sit back on his heels, keeping his distance. "May I hand you the cup?" Another question. She gave a shaky yes. His fingers brushed hers only long enough to transfer the warmth. She drank in small swallows, salt and bone and thyme anchoring her in the present. When her breathing slowed, he asked, "May I check the pup through the bond?" "Just touch. No pressure. You can refuse." Surprise flickered through her, sharp as flint. Even now, even for this. She set the cup down and placed her own hand over the lower curve of her abdomen first, a shield and an invitation both. Then she nodded. Orion moved to the edge of the cot and laid 2 fingers lightly beside hers. Heat traveled from his skin, not the consuming force from earlier, but a measured current, controlled to a thread. She felt it descend through muscle and fear, reaching for the tiny heartbeat nested deep. A moment later, the child rolled, calm and deliberate. Relief broke across his face so openly she almost looked away from the intimacy of it. "Strong," he murmured. "Stubborn. Already takes after you." A short, startled laugh escaped her despite herself. "You do not know me well enough to say that." His mouth tilted, the scar pulling with the movement. I watched you run through freezing rain while hunted, collapse, wake, and still bargain for your own terms. Brave Fitz. The word hit harder than any praise she had ever received. Not useful, not dutiful, not difficult. Brave. She swallowed and stared at the cup. People keep mistaking endurance for obedience, she said quietly. They think if a woman survives something, she has agreed to it. I know. His answer came flat with old anger. They are wrong. Silence settled, companionable for the first time. The hand flame snapped softly under the pot. Wind brushed the glass slits with a low hum. Her gaze returned to his scar. In sleep-starved darkness, she found herself asking the question she had avoided all day. How did it happen? He did not deflect. South Ridge Campaign. 3 recruits under me, barely through first shift training. Enemy line broke with cursed steel. One blade got through where it should not have. He touched the scar's lower edge. I stepped in. It took my face instead of all 3 of theirs. Cursed steel should have killed you. It almost did. A dry note entered his voice. I am harder to remove than good sense would recommend. She studied him, reevaluating every tavern rumor she had ever absorbed. And the stories? About you tearing rivals apart? Some are propaganda. Some are fear doing embroidery on facts. Some are true in ways I do not celebrate. His eyes held hers, unflinching. But I have never used my strength to corner a wounded wolf who could not leave the room. The directness left no space for comforting illusions. Strangely, that made him easier to believe. He reached for the pot and grimaced at the scorched bottom. Evidence suggests I remain unmatched in one field. She frowned. What field? Ruining porridge. The corner of his mouth twitched. I burned 3 pots in one night trying to make something edible for you. The healer threatened to revoke my access to grain. A helpless laugh rose from her, thin but real, and the knot behind her ribs loosened a fraction. Orion looked absurdly pleased, as if he had won a campaign. There, he said. That sound. Keep it. You are very commanding for a rankless soldier. His expression went carefully neutral. Occupational hazard. They talked until the broth cooled. Small things and hard things braided together. Which herbs made her nauseous. How the child favored the right side when storms rolled in. Why she hated being called fragile. Why he paced corridors instead of sleeping. Each time he needed to adjust a blanket or examine her wrist, he asked first. Each time she granted permission, the answer came a little quicker. By dawn, she no longer startled when he entered. By late afternoon, they left the tower under sealed travel orders, moving east in a canvas-covered wagon with Orion on the rear step and 4 of his unit riding flank. The sky had cleared to a pale, brittle blue. Frost silvered the ditch grass. Guinevere sat upright against rolled blankets, cloak fastened high to hide the brand and the trembling she still could not fully control. They reached a border checkpoint at sunset, where 2 patrol wolves in wildfire colors stood beneath a timber arch, marked with tax runes and old claw scars. Their captain checked papers with performative slowness, eyes sliding to Guinevere's wrist as her sleeve shifted. Well, look at this, one guard said, stepping closer with a smirk too practiced to be spontaneous. Trader broodmare traveling with Crown Freight. The second reached for her arm. Let us see the mark proper. Orion moved between them so fast the wagon boards barely creaked. He was still dressed plain. No crest, no crown, just dark leathers and that scar catching the last light. He did not raise his voice. You will remove your hand. The guard scoffed and held position. Orion let a sliver of power slip. It was not dramatic. No roar, no visible aura, just a sudden pressure in the lungs, an ancient command threaded through bone. Both patrol wolves froze. Their eyes dropped to the dirt, necks baring in instinctive submission they could not mask quickly enough. The captain swallowed. No offense meant. Intent is not the only measure of harm, Orion replied. Record this exactly. Checkpoint personnel attempted unlawful contact with a marked exile under Crown Transit. Repeat offense, and I return with auditors. He held the captain's gaze until the older wolf nodded, sweating despite the cold. Papers were stamped, the barrier lifted. No one looked at Guinevere again. As the wagon rolled forward, she stared at Orion's profile and felt another piece of the puzzle lock into place. Rankless men did not make patrol captains bow without touching them. Rankless men did not threaten audits with confidence they would happen. The question pressed against her teeth. She did not ask. Not yet. Night fell hard an hour later as they entered pine country, the road narrowing between black trunks and basalt outcrops. Hoofbeats changed cadence ahead. Orion's hand lifted in a silent signal. Riders spread. The first bolt struck the wagon frame with a metallic thunk and a spray of splinters. Horses screamed. A second bolt came low, silver-tipped, aimed through the rear opening where Guinevere sat. Orion twisted, taking it high in the shoulder as he turned his body across her line. He hit the ground on one knee, ripped the shaft free, and bared his teeth as the partial shift took him. Claws extending, canines lengthening, gaze gone feral with controlled fury. "Cover!" he barked. "Ditch line, now!" She jumped from the wagon and ran to the road embankment, sliding behind a fallen cedar trunk while arrows hissed overhead. 4 hunters broke from the trees in patched leathers, faces masked with ash, wildfire coin rings visible on one gloved hand. Lachlan's paid wolves. Orion met them at the wheel line, wounded shoulder bleeding through torn leather, stance anchored like stone. He fought without grandstanding, economy, and force, driving one attacker back with a forearm strike, disarming another with a twist that sent chain flashing into mud. His unit engaged the flanks, steel on steel in short, violent bursts. "Stay down," he shouted toward her without looking. She obeyed for 3 heartbeats. Then she saw a 5th hunter circling wide through brush, blade angled toward Orion's blind side. No. A broken spear lay half-buried near the ditch, dropped by one of the escorts. Guinevere grabbed it, palms burning against rough wood, and surged from cover with a sound she did not recognize as her own. She drove the spear haft low into the circling hunter's knees, unbalancing him long enough for Orion to turn and slam him to the ground. He stared at her, disbelief and fury colliding. "I told you to run." "I did," she snapped, breath ragged. "Then I came back." Another attacker lunged. She pivoted, keeping to Orion's back, spear held crosswise as he took the front line. They moved on instinct, awkward for 2 beats, then synchronized, his strike creating openings, her staff work closing gaps, neither mistaking the other for fragile cargo. When the last hunter broke and fled into the trees, 2 escorts gave chase and returned minutes later with a bloodied mask and no prisoner. "Gone," one soldier reported, left a scent trail split at the creek. Orion cursed under his breath, then turned to Guinevere, scanning her for injuries with hands hovering, waiting for consent even in adrenaline's aftermath. She nodded once. He checked her wrists, her side, the line of her abdomen, then exhaled a shaking breath. "You could have been killed." "So could you." Rain began again, light and cold, ticking on leaves and wagon canvas. The world smelled of silver, pine sap, and battle heat fading into night. Orion pressed his good hand to the side of the wagon and lowered his head for one raw second. When he looked up, there was no command in his face, only stark honesty. "I do not know how to protect you from everything." Guinevere stepped closer until his breath touched her forehead. "You are not using me as bait. You are not bargaining my life for strategy. That is already different from every wolf who claimed to guard me." She reached for his uninjured hand and laced their fingers, deliberate, undeniable. His claws had receded, but his grip trembled around hers. "Next time," she said, voice steadier than she felt. We choose together when to run. For the first time since the tribunal, lowering her guard did not feel like surrender. It felt like stepping onto ground that might hold. Ground that might hold proved slick again the moment Orion released her hand and began issuing orders. Torches low. Check brush and ditch for a second team. Keep one rider on the ridge. His voice carried across the wet road, clipped and controlled despite the blood darkening his shoulder. No one burns bodies. I want gear, bolts, coin rings, anything with scent. The escorts moved immediately. Guinevere leaned the broken spear against the wagon and forced her breathing into rhythm while rain thinned to mist. One hunter groaned where he had fallen near the wheel rut, leg pinned at an angle that made escape unlikely. Another had dropped a leather satchel during the scramble. It lay half open in the mud, papers swelling with water. Orion glanced at her. Can you stand if the road turns again? Yes. Then stay where you can see me. It was not a cage. It was a line he intended to hold. She crouched beside the satchel, careful of her balance, and pulled out the top packet. Wax seals had blurred, but the impressed mark was still readable. Wildfire crest over a split moon. Lachlan's private sigil burned into red lacquer. Under it sat 3 folded records on Moon Priest parchment. Even soaked, the script was precise. Subject, Guinevere Blood Moon. Fertility status, voided. Conception event after void declaration constitutes evidence of outside contamination and treasonous Congress. Her stomach clenched. Orion. He came at once, scanned the first sheet, then the second. The second was worse. Payment notations ran down one margin beside witness names she recognized from the tribunal. Stable hand, server, priest assistant. Each had a coin amount and a cent token code. The wounded hunter laughed through gritted teeth. He said no one checks temple ink in the rain. Orion's expression did not change. Who briefed you? The hunter spat pink into the mud. Why would I? Orion crouched, close enough that the man smelled the alpha force under restraint. Because the next patrol I summon will be Crown interrogators, not field soldiers, and they peel lies patiently. Start now, and you keep your tongue and your fingers. The hunter's bravado cracked. Lachlan paid us to turn your route. Make it look like your unit stole her. We were to leave 2 dead in stormborn colors and 1 witness breathing. He coughed, then winced. At dawn, he announces a purification rite, says the pup is a kingbreaker omen and must be ended before first breath. Says fear will put every pack behind him. Guinevere went cold from scalp to heel. The words from her nightmare slid into waking life with ugly precision. Orion held up the 3rd sheet. And this? Council draft, Regency petition. He claims Blood Moon inheritance and emergency authority while kingdom stabilizes. The hunter swallowed hard. He says once she is gone and you are blamed for kidnapping, Pax will demand retaliation. He steps in as mediator. Hero story writes itself. For a long beat, only Rain spoke. Then Orion rose and called to his second, a broad-shouldered woman with cropped dark hair and a scar across one brow. Mara, bind him and keep him breathing. He is evidence now. Mara nodded once. On it. Guinevere stared at the papers in Orion's hand and felt fury climb through fear like flame-finding oil. Lachlan had not simply tried to destroy her. He had architected a kingdom panic and stitched her body to the center of it as sacrifice. Orion read the Regency draft again, jaw set. When he looked up, there was no room left for pretense. You need the full board, not fragments. I stopped believing fragments when my own family forged my scent. Fair. He drew a breath that looked like pain, either from the shoulder or from what came next. I am Orion Stormborn, yes. I am also the reigning Alpha King. The world did not tilt. It aligned. Guinevere's first response was not awe. It was a tired, incredulous exhale. Of course you are. A rough thread of humor touched his mouth and vanished. Lachlan petitioned the Outer Council yesterday for emergency powers. He expected me to sign transport warrants blind while I was on border inspection. When I refused without hearing from you directly, he pushed the purification narrative to temple circles. He is moving faster than formal law can answer. And now he has these. She tapped the forged records. He had them long before tonight. We simply finally possess copies with his field seals and payment ledger in one satchel. Orion folded the documents into oilcloth and handed them to Mara. Chain of custody begins now. Witness log every transfer. By the time they reset the wagon and mounted out, the moon had climbed above the pines in a thin white arc, and every mile of road felt borrowed. Orion refused to ride inside despite his wound. Guinevere watched him from the rear opening, rain beading on his hair. One hand braced against the frame as if pain were a private inconvenience. At the next halt, she climbed down before anyone could argue, took the healer kit from the side chest, and pointed to a flat stone near the wheel. Sit. His brow lifted. That sounded like a royal command. Try disobeying and see what happens. Mara choked on a laugh and tactfully walked the horses farther down the verge. Orion sat. Guinevere cut away blood-stiff leather at his shoulder, cleaned the bolt groove with warmed water, and packed it with crushed yarrow paste while he kept perfectly still. Up close, she felt the bond like a live thread between their ribs, tightening when he hissed through his teeth, easing when she laid her palm above his heart to steady him. "Does this hurt?" she asked. "Yes." Good answer. I am learning the fastest route to your approval is honesty. You are learning late. He tilted his head so she could tie the bandage knot. Guinevere. The way he said her name made her hands pause. I did not tell you who I was because titles distort consent, he said. I needed your no to be real if you gave it. Her throat worked once. And if I had said go, I would have sent guards, healers, and legal escort under another commander. I would have obeyed. She believed him. That was the frightening part. I am standing in mud, wrapping the shoulder of the most dangerous wolf in the kingdom, and my pulse calms when he leans into my hand. I am not naive. Power can wear gentleness as camouflage. I have lived that lesson at knife point. Yet each choice he makes leaves me more room, not less. He asks where others seized. He waits where others forced. The bond is not a spell that erases history. It is a mirror that magnifies it. Every bruise of memory shows, every instinct to flee. I want him near anyway. I want him near, and I am angry that wanting still scares me. Maybe courage is not the absence of that fear. Maybe courage is deciding what to do while it burns. She finished the bandage and sat back. Orion caught her wrist lightly, eyes searching hers for permission even then. She nodded. He pressed his mouth to the inside of her palm, just once, reverent and brief, then let go. 2 nights later, as the road bent southeast toward the old council arteries, the first external reply to Orion's dispatch arrived. A gray hawk dropped onto the wagon rail at dawn with a tube tied to its leg, and the crown cipher scorched into brass. Mara broke the seal, read, and swore under her breath before handing the strip to Orion. He read it twice, then gave it to Guinevere. By authority of interim council quorum, immediate surrender ordered. Guinevere Bloodmoon to Temple of Purification pending omen adjudication. Orion Stormborn unit to stand down and submit route logs for investigation into unlawful extraction of marked exile. Under the main text sat 6 signatures. 4 were known opportunists. 2 were elders who owed Bloodmoon favors and had still signed. Interim quorum, Guinevere said flatly. He bought enough chairs to counterfeit legitimacy. He also moved faster than my central court can reconvene, Orion answered. This order is procedurally corrupt and still dangerous because frightened packs obey paper first and questions later. Pressure built by the hour. At each checkpoint, rumors had arrived before they did. Bells rang from watchposts as they passed. A tanner outside a gatehouse spat at the ground near Guinevere's boot and muttered about cursed wombs. No one touched her now, not with Orion present, yet hatred no longer bothered to hide. By the second evening, they reached the river crossroads at Greyglass Ford and found the bridge chains lowered. Temple enforcers waited on the far side in pale ceremonial armor, silver cords looped at their belts. Beside them stood a council herald with a scroll case and a smile too smooth for the cold wind. "By order of interim quorum," he called, voice amplified by rune shell, "deliver the accused and kneel for audit." Orion stepped down from the wagon. "Produce original writ with lunar timestamp and full council wax." The herald lifted a parchment. "You are in no position to negotiate." Mara shifted left, hand near her blade. The escorts fanned subtly, placing themselves between Guinevere and the bridge line. Wind carried wet stone, horse breath, and the sweet metallic tang of precast temple restraints. Guinevere watched the herald's fingers, ink stains at the nail beds. Fresh. He had copied or amended documents himself. "They altered it," she said quietly to Orion. "Look at the witness line." He did. His face sharpened. "There are 9 names in different hands, sloppy overlays." The herald's smile thinned. "Last chance, Stormborn." Something ancient looked out through Orion's eyes, amber deepening as his control narrowed to a blade edge. "You will stand down and send your highest priest to meet me at first bell tomorrow. Bring untouched registry books. Bring ink samples. Bring the clerk who filed Guinevere's fertility void." A murmur ran through the enforcers. This had stopped sounding like a field seizure and started sounding like exposure. The herald snapped his fingers. Hidden archers rose from the riverbank reeds behind Orion's unit, not temple at all but hired wolves in mixed leathers, crossbows already leveled. One bolt struck the wagon wheel hub. Another punched through the canvas inches from Guinevere's shoulder. Mara shouted, "Ambush rear!" Chaos broke across the ford in hard, bright fragments. Escorts dragged shields from saddle racks. Temple lines split, some advancing, some falling back as if not all had known this was coming. The herald retreated behind his guard with practiced speed. Orion vaulted to the wagon and seized Guinevere's hand. "Down the embankment. Stay with me." They ran as bolts shredded the sideboards. Mud gave way under her boots. Orion took her weight without slowing, steering her toward a spill of black stones beneath the bridge. Above them, steel rang and wolves shouted over river roar. A flare ignited at the bridge crown, not red or blue, but wildfire green, the private signal Lachlan's scouts used for confirmation. Guinevere looked up through the rain and saw, on the parapet, Lachlan himself in blood-red leathers, cloak snapping in the wind, mouth curved in triumph. His voice carried by rune shell, bright with theater. "Cousin, they told me you were difficult to kill." Orion moved in front of her, half-crouched, body a shield. Guinevere felt the child kick hard against her palm, then another sharp tightening low in her abdomen that stole her breath. Lachlan lifted a silver chain blade, letting it gleam in lightning. "Bring her to the stone circle by moonrise," he called to the fighters above. "Or I start purification without witnesses and name the king a kidnapper before dawn." Another cramp gripped her, deeper this time, and the river seemed to surge louder as Orion's hand found hers in the dark under the bridge, while enemies closed from both banks. Another cramp folded Guinevere over Orion's arm, sharp enough to turn the edges of the world white for a breath. Above them, the bridge thundered with boots and shouted orders while bolts struck stone in fast, splintering bursts. Orion dragged her deeper into the shadow of the embankment and scanned both banks, calculating angles, distances, casualties, outcomes, all in one hard sweep. Mara slid down the rocks to their left with 2 shields and a cut across her temple, breathing fast but controlled. "Rear line is compromised," she said. "Temple enforcers split. Half are withdrawing, half are taking coin commands from wildfire men. We can push South Ravine for extraction. Lachlan's voice crashed over the river again, amplified by runes and arrogance. Orion Stormborn shelters a traitor and her cursed Get. Witness it. Witness your king choosing blood corruption over law. Guinevere gripped the slick edge of stone until her knuckles ached. The trap had layers now. If they fled, Lachlan would claim abduction. If they fought here, he would stage the dead and write the same story anyway. The child shifted low, then settled when Orion's palm pressed between her shoulders, steadying her breath through the bond. "We cannot win this on a road," she said, forcing each word past pain. "He built this for rumor." Orion's gaze snapped to her. "Then we break him somewhere. Rumor cannot hide." The stone circle. Her voice strengthened as the logic locked in. "Public. Oathstone. Sent witness. He wants Moonrise Theater. We take Moonrise and strip him there." Mara stared, startled. The right of sent truth is forbidden in pregnancy. Forbidden because men fear women who can make lies smell like what they are. Guinevere looked at Orion and did not look away. "If you carry me out now, he still owns the story. If I stand in that circle and call truth, he loses the kingdom." Orion's jaw tightened with raw conflict, protector and king colliding behind his eyes. Then he nodded once, abrupt and absolute. "We move to the circle on our terms. Mara, signal regroup and witness call. Every neutral patrol within 3 miles, every priest not sworn to Wildfire coin, every scribe with ink. No closed ritual, no private custody." Mara bared her teeth in grim approval and bolted upslope. Orion cupped Guinevere's face, rain and river spray cold on his skin. "I need your consent clearly. This will hurt. I cannot promise otherwise." "You have it," she said, "but no sedation herbs. I stay clear." "Done." By the time the moon cleared the cloud shelf, white and merciless over Greyglass Ford, the ancient stone circle above the river was ringed 3 deep with wolves from 6 territories, temple attendants, road soldiers, and trembling opportunists who had come to see spectacle and found law instead. Torches hissed in damp wind. The oath stone at the center rose chest-high, black granite veined with silver, old as dynasty memory. Lachlan stood on the western side in ceremonial red, chain blade coiled at his hip, expression polished into righteous sorrow for the crowd. Beside him waited the herald from the bridge and 2 moon priest clerks, both pale. Guinevere climbed the final steps under her own power. Orion stayed half a pace behind, wounded shoulder-bound, presence like drawn steel. His unit formed a perimeter with shields grounded, and Mara handed sealed oilcloth packets to 3 independent scribes in full view of everyone. Lachlan spread his hands. "Cousin, you arrive bloodstained, escorted by armed men, carrying a child conceived outside lawful record. Yield peacefully, and the purification may still cleanse your line." A murmur rolled through the ring. Guinevere stepped to the eastern marker stone and raised her branded wrist. "I invoke blood right challenge under pre-corruption crown code. I demand right of sent truth before any sentence, witnessed under moon and oath stone." One priest recoiled. "She is with child. The channel could rupture." "It could," Guinevere said. "So could the kingdom if you let forged ink replace law." Lachlan laughed softly. "Listen to her, dramatic to the end. She cannot perform the rite because she has no clean scent left." Orion's voice cut across him, low and carrying. "Challenge has been lawfully invoked. Refusal is confession." The herald tried to lift a scroll. Interim quorum already ordered surrender. Mara took 2 steps forward and held up the bridge writ beside a second parchment recovered from the satchel. Same seals, different witness lines, 9 names layered in 3 inks. We have both copies and filing residue from your hand. She turned toward the crowd. "Ask why a lawful order needed rewriting." The herald's composure cracked. Guinevere moved to the oath stone. Her pulse hammered so hard she felt it in her teeth. The child pressed against her palm. Alive, present, a steadying weight. She drew Orion's belt knife, met his eyes for one final permission check, and when he nodded, she sliced her palm in one clean line. Blood welled bright. She pressed that hand to the granite, then slammed her branded wrist beside it, traitor mark against moonvein stone. Pain surged up her arm like fire through wire. She swallowed a cry, dropped to one knee, and called from a place older than fear. By motherline memory and moon witness, let false scent burn away. Let bought mouths carry what they sold. Let hidden hands be known. The oathstone answered. Silver light bled through the granite veins and spilled outward in a low wave, not visible flame but concentrated memory scent, thick as storm air. It struck the first ring of witnesses and rippled through them. Wolves staggered, gasped, clutched their throats as scenes not their own flooded their senses. Lachlan sliding coin across a table to the stable hand, the server girl weeping while he threatened her brother's rank. Bitterroot powder tipped into elder wine by gloved fingers wearing wildfire signet rings. The herald at a back desk, scraping signatures and overlaying new names under fresh wax. Cries broke around the circle. I smell it. Moon, save us. That is his office. That is my cousin's ledger room. Guinevere held the channel open while agony climbed her spine in fierce, tightening waves. Her vision tunneled. Orion was suddenly at her side, one hand hovering near her back. Say yes, he said, voice shaking for the first time she had heard. Let me anchor. Yes. He touched two fingers to the pulse at her throat, then her belly, threading his strength through the bond with careful precision, giving her a line to hold without stealing control. The pressure in her abdomen eased enough to breathe. She forced the right wider. See him, she whispered to the crowd. Smell your protector. Lachlan's mask shattered. Stop this. He lunged. The chain blade snapped from his wrist in a silver arc aimed straight at Guinevere's stomach. Orion moved in the same instant, partial shift breaking through his control, claws extending, shoulders broadening as he drove forward. Guinevere did not retreat. She pulled from the oath stone with both hands and cast what the right had awakened. Moonfire binding burst from her blooded palm in white-silver strands, alive and precise. It caught the chain mid-strike, wrapped Lachlan's wrists, then climbed to his throat in tightening loops of light. The blade clattered harmlessly across stone. Lachlan crashed to his knees, snarling, as Orion's war form slammed him onto the altar slab and pinned him there with one massive forearm across his chest. The entire circle went silent except for Lachlan's ragged breathing and the hiss of moonfire. Orion looked to Guinevere, feral gaze blazing, and waited for her command. She rose slowly, blood on her mouth where she had bitten through pain, hand still shaking, voice steady anyway. You called me a stain on our bloodline, Lachlan. She stepped close enough that he had to meet her eyes. You were the rot. He spat toward her boots. No one crowns the abandoned. Orion's answer was a growl threaded with law. She was never abandoned by the truth. Lachlan thrashed against the binding, panic finally visible. I can still bargain. The interim quorum signed. Half the council stands with me. Kill me, and you split the kingdom. Guinevere turned to the witnesses, then back to him. You already split it when you made fear your currency. She faced the oath stone and spoke in formal cadence, each word carrying into the outer rings. Under King's law and bloodright testimony, I pronounce Lachlan Wildfire guilty of treason, judicial corruption, attempted ritual murder, and conspiracy to incite interpack war. I request stripping of pack protections and moon judgment. The stone flared. Silver fire ran across Lachlan's signet, his forged sigil charms, the hidden rune tabs sewn into his collar, consuming each to ash without touching the flesh beneath. A collective gasp moved through the crowd as the protection marks at his throat and sternum went dark, severed by Oathstone acceptance. He looked suddenly smaller, not weaker in body, but emptied of the legal armor he had worn like divine right. The senior neutral priest, hands trembling, stepped forward with the judgment staff. Moon accepts sentence. Do you recant? Lachlan's eyes cut to Guinevere, hatred naked now. You should have died in the rain. Guinevere held his gaze. I did not. The priest lowered the staff to Lachlan's chest and invoked the final clause. Light gathered, bright and clean, and when it cleared, Lachlan lay still on the stone, his chain blade dark beside him. His claim to power ended in full witness of the kingdom he had tried to counterfeit. No cheer rose, only stunned silence, then the sound of wolves exhaling as if surfacing from deep water. Guinevere swayed. Orion caught her before her knees buckled, one arm braced around her back, the other hand spread protectively over the curve of her belly. The child answered with a firm, reassuring kick against his palm. Relief broke across his face so fiercely it looked like pain. Around them, one by one, wolves bent knee, not to spectacle, not to fear, but to the truth she had dragged into moonlight with her own blood. Orion held her as the last kneeling wolves lowered their heads, and Guinevere felt the tremor in his arms only when the crowd began to move again, and duty reclaimed him. Mara was already barking assignments to scribes and guards, her voice hoarse and efficient. Satchel ledger to the central archive chest, sealed in front of witnesses. Bridge, writ copies, and ink scrapings to temple examiners and crown court both. Coin rings tagged by body and location. No shortcuts. The gray-haired healer from the watchtower appeared at Guinevere's side, as if summoned by instinct, checked her pulse, then pressed 2 fingers lightly to her belly. Strong rhythm, she murmured. You can walk if you lean on him. The senior priest raised his staff and called formal custody in a carrying voice. The herald was bound on the western stones, both clerks beside him, hands stained dark where fresh ink had betrayed them. The wounded hunter from the road sat under guard and, when asked before witnesses, repeated his statement without hedging. The old veteran from Orion's Gate gave testimony about the sealed ring order and transport chain. Nothing vanished into rumor this time. Everything was named. By first bell, they brought Guinevere and Orion through the royal sanctuary doors and down to the Moonwell chamber beneath the keep, where spring water ran in a circular basin veined with moonstone, and the air held lavender smoke, wet stone, and the quiet pulse of old magic. Orion dismissed everyone but Mara and the healer to the far archway, where they stood with their backs turned in formal respect. Then he faced Guinevere fully, blood still drying at his collar, scar stark in silver light, and for once the king looked less like a weapon than a man at the edge of prayer. I can wait, he said, voice unsteady with effort. A day, a month, until after birth, until after coronation, until you never want this at all. The bond is not permission by itself. I need your word. Guinevere looked at him, at the care carved into every rigid line of his body, and let herself feel the full shape of the choice. I am standing in sacred water with the male who could command armies, and instead asked me again. I am still afraid of cages, of hands that close after they soothe, of being praised only when I disappear. But this is not disappearing. This is me, named and alive, choosing in my own voice. The fear is here. So is the certainty. I do not owe my pain more loyalty than my future. I do not owe the tribunal my loneliness. I choose the wolf who waited when waiting hurt him. I choose the one who asked. She stepped into him until their foreheads touched. Yes, claim me. His eyes shut for one raw breath. Say stop at any point and I stop. Yes. He slid one hand to the back of her neck, the other braced at her waist, and lowered his mouth to the junction of her neck and shoulder where pulse met collarbone. His teeth grazed skin first, a warning, a question. She nodded against his cheek. Then he bit. Pain flashed bright and immediate, sharp enough to draw a strangled sound from her throat. The next heartbeat transformed it. Heat poured through the wound in a flooding wave, not erasing the ache, but turning it molten and meaningful, as if every locked room inside her chest had been thrown open to warm light at once. Her knees buckled. Orion caught her, murmuring against her skin, "Mine, mine, if you still want it. Mine." She gripped his shoulders, breath shaking. "Yours." Gold and silver threads ignited between them, visible now, streaming from chest to chest in braided lines that pulsed with each shared breath. The child rolled once, then settled into deep calm. Relief and devotion hit Orion so fiercely she felt it as clearly as her own pulse through the completed channel. He drew back just enough for her to see his face. "Mate," he whispered, reverent, stunned. "Mate," she answered. Then she cupped his scarred jaw with both hands and kissed the old wound, slow and deliberate, the way she had wanted to when fear still stood between them. Orion made a rough sound that was almost a laugh and almost a sob. She traced the edge of his throat where scar tissue met unmarked skin. "Your turn," he said, and bared his neck. She held his gaze for consent. He nodded once. Guinevere leaned in and bit at the base of his throat, right where the scar's lower line faded into skin. He shuddered under her mouth, fingers tightening at her hips, but he did not move away. The taste of salt and iron sparked another surge through the bond, this one wider, deeper, carrying not only desire but memory. Rain and mud and terror on the road, his hand steady at her elbow, her spear at his back, his palm over her belly under collapsing sky, the moment he waited for her command over Lachlan's body. Pain flared, then softened into a fierce, stabilizing warmth that settled in her bones. "Mine," she whispered against his skin. "Yours," he breathed. When she lifted her head, matching marks glowed faintly on both of them, then sank under the skin like embers banked for winter. The threads remained, less wild now, a constant hum rather than a storm. Orion folded her into his arms and simply held her, cheek against her hair, both of them shaking with the aftermath. Mara, still facing away, cleared her throat softly from the arch. "Majesty, the council requests immediate hearing." Orion did not release Guinevere. "They can request while waiting." Guinevere laughed, breathless and tired, and leaned into him. "Let them wait 1 minute longer." They took 5. By the 6th dawn after Greyglass Ford, the great hall stood full from doors to dais, every banner washed and rehung, every rumor forced into open record. Guinevere entered beside Orion in moon white and black, her belly proud beneath the fitted ceremonial mantle, her traitor brand uncovered by choice. The same elder who had once read her exile sentence now stood below the steps, stripped of rank braid, awaiting judgment with lowered eyes. Mara read the evidence chain aloud before all witnesses. The road satchel and payment ledger, sealed and opened under 9 signatures. Forged Moon Priest fertility records matched to altered ink batches. Bridge writ overlays with copied witness lines. Recovered coin rings and hired hunter statements. The Herald's confession. Temple clerk testimony. Patrol logs from Orion's unit. Healer records from the watchtower proving timing of Guinevere's collapse and care. Every item had a destination, a seal, a reader, and a ruling. Nothing remained floating. The council vote was not close. Interim quorum orders were voided as corrupt. The herald and complicit clerks were sentenced to labor under oath supervision for document treason. The disgraced elder lost title and was exiled to a non-governing monastery. The patrol captain who had allowed unlawful contact at the checkpoint was suspended and reassigned after formal admission. The veteran gate commander was commended for lawful compliance. The wounded hunter, having testified fully and accepted sentence, was remanded to border service under Gias instead of execution. Then the high priestess called Guinevere forward to the moon dais. Orion stood at her right, not ahead of her. In full view of the kingdom, the priestess laid silver water across Guinevere's wrist. The broken crescent exile mark flared, burned white, and reshaped into a new sigil, a whole moon crossed by a rising line, survival made sovereign. Guinevere Bloodmoon Stormborn, the priestess declared, recognized mate of Orion Stormborn, High Luna Queen of the United Pax. The hall answered with one thunderous kneel. Afterward, in the law chamber rather than the feast room, Guinevere signed her first decrees, while Orion watched with open pride and no attempt to steer her hand. Sanctuary law for abandoned she-wolves and orphaned pups passed before noon, with the Watchtower Infirmary converted to the first protected house, and the gray-haired healer appointed its warden. Tribunal procedure was dismantled and replaced with mandatory right of sent truth review in all treason accusations. Pregnancy no longer an automatic disqualification, but a protected condition with bonded anchor rights. Mara accepted command of the new Crown Witness Guard, tasked with evidence custody across pack borders. When the chamber finally emptied, Guinevere stood by the window overlooking the inner courtyard, where young wolves chased each other between sunlit stones, and two old soldiers argued cheerfully over training forms. Peace did not feel like silence. It felt like work done in daylight. Orion came behind her, one hand resting over her belly, the other finding her marked shoulder with tenderness that still startled her. Through the bond came steadiness, devotion, and a quiet wonder that had not dimmed. She turned in his arms and touched the scar that had once frightened a kingdom. "I see you," she said. His mouth softened along that old blade line. "I choose you." She smiled, eyes bright, heart full and unafraid. "I keep you. Always, mate." Outside, bells rang first meal across a court no longer built on counterfeit truth, and their child answered with a strong kick beneath their joined hands.